Newark International Airport, February 24th, 1996. Millionaire businessman Frank Black boards a flight bound for West Palm Beach, Florida. His family and friends never see him again. Frank Black simply vanishes into thin air. Investigators suspect the worst.
It's your ancient motivations for murder. It's hatred, it's anger, and it's greed.
This was about as difficult a case as you could get. There's no body. It was a DNA wasteland.
This was a tough crime. This was a no-body murder case. Extremely tough.
And there's a perception among people that if you don't have a body, you don't have a case.
Black's disappearance evolves into a massive multi-state investigation spanning thousands of miles. It's an investigation with no body, no murder weapon, and no eyewitnesses. Determining Frank Black's final moments and proving that he was murdered will challenge investigators to the core. The mystery of Frank Black's disappearance begins at the Newark airport. Acting on a missing persons report, police find Black's car exactly where they expect to. There are no signs of damage and no signs of foul play. FBI Special Agent John Turkington heads up the investigation.
The first information that we got regarding the disappearance of Frank Black was a contact by one of his daughters, Leanna. She was quite concerned because she hadn't heard from him. It was very much out of his character not to stay in touch with her as well as her sister, Diane, on a regular basis.
Turkington learns Black is a man with two passions, his school bus business and his daughters. He learns that Black left New Jersey to look into a business deal in Florida. He was only supposed to be gone for one night, but he never came back home. His daughters are terrified something has happened to their father. Busing is in the Black family blood, specifically school buses. Frank Black's family has been transporting school children for over 30 years. Under Frank's leadership, the company has made him millions. The workaholic, hands-on busing chief was going to close one last deal in Florida before retiring to enjoy his success. Agent Turkington's first task is to pick up on Black's trail and figure out who would want him to vanish.
We had determined that the purpose of the business trip was to meet with a woman by the name of Mia Giordano. She had made a series of phone calls to the business over the week before Frank Black left, and she had told Frank that she wanted to discuss the sale of school buses. She had told him that she had seen a sticker with his company name on it in Florida and liked the product and represented a company from South America that wanted to buy 60 of these school vehicles for export to South America. Now, this would have been the biggest contract that Frank Black ever had.
Giordano becomes Turkington's elusive white rabbit.
The information that came in regarding Mia Giordano, she was kind of a mystery woman. When she called the business, she would never leave a callback number. She would never identify who she represented, what business she worked for, or anything like that. So we had no identifying information.
For Turkington, Giordano is nothing but a name. He and his team work the phones and pore over telephone records, searching for any sign of one Mia Giordano. Whoever she is, her name doesn't register with any FBI database. In the hunt to find Mia Giordano, investigators turn to Frank Black's phone call verbatims. The verbatims are records which trace the origin of phone calls Black received on those critical days just before he disappeared. Jackpot. A pattern emerges. Dozens of calls to Black came from 2 locations around St. Lucie, Florida. If investigators are going to find Frank Black, signs point south to Florida.
When the telephone record showed that the calls from Mia Giordano had originated from Florida, we got in touch with the FBI office down there. They contacted the sheriff's offices as well as the FDLE, and they started a parallel investigation regarding all the events that had taken place in Florida, trying to retrace Frank Black's steps from the time he got off the plane in West Palm to the time that he disappeared.
Turkington hands FDLE Special Agent Mike Driscoll the reins as lead investigator on the mysterious disappearance case.
Well, it's not uncommon for people to come down to Florida, particularly during the winter, for vacation. And in my experience, it's further not uncommon for people to want to disappear for a few days. I was kind of hoping that was the case.
An impulsive disappearance is out of character for Black, but Turkington passes Driscoll a tantalizing lead.
One of the things that we wanted to know was who this woman was and how Frank was going to hook up with her in West Palm Beach, Florida. What he had told a couple of his friends was that she had described herself as 5 foot tall, blonde, mostly legs, and she'll be the hottest thing at the airport, which Frank kind of laughed about with his friends, but he seemed to be looking forward to this meeting at the airport with her.
Driscoll's first order of business is to track down Mia Giordano. Whoever she is, she's the key link to finding Frank Black. "5 feet tall, blonde, mostly legs, and extremely hot. This is all Agent Driscoll has on the mysterious Mia Giordano. Working from the phone company records, he and his surveillance team zero in on 2 key locations. Locations of repeated calls to Frank Black in the days leading up to his disappearance.
Well, at least it's a good area to see.
Locations that should lead them to Mia Giordano.
I think we got movement there.
We were able to identify the source of those telephone calls as Lisa Costello's apartment in Jupiter and Alan Mackerley's residence here in Stewart.
Costello and Mackerley, brand new names for Agent Driscoll.
Well, the surveillance activities that we initially conducted showed that vehicles listed to Alan Mackerley and/or Lisa Costello were at both residences. So the investigation clearly showed that Mackerley and Costello had a relationship. They were like boyfriend and girlfriend.
Yeah, Mia, Lisa, it's the same one. You're getting this right?
Yeah.
So we were able to determine, obviously, that the 2 were, for the most part, living together at Mackerley's residence in Stewart.
The discovery is a huge step forward for Agent Driscoll. Now he knows Mia Giordano does in fact exist. Mia is an alias. Her real name is Lisa Costello. He also knows the 2 homes and 2 players are intimately connected. A background check on Alan Mackerley reveals he's also from New Jersey and also in the school bus business. Over the past couple of decades, his company has made him millions. But recently, Mackerley has been working less and spending more time living the good life in Florida. He has a $300,000 speedboat, a $500,000 yacht, a Cessna airplane, a beautiful beach house, a nightclub, and a reputation as a playboy.
Alan Mackerley was a longtime friend of Frank Black. Frank Black was actually his mentor in the bus business. They had known each other for over 40 years. And in fact, Alan Mackerley had introduced Frank Black's wife to him many years ago. But over the years, that personal relationship deteriorated when the business relationship crossed over. There was fierce competition among the bus companies. And in the last few years, there had been accusations that Frank Black had been bad-mouthing Alan Mackerley to other municipalities that were looking for school bus contracts. The one event that brought things to a head was a bus contract in a town in Morris County that formerly belonged to Alan Mackerley. Frank Black had underbid him and won the contract, and this greatly angered Mackerley.
The plush Morris County contract is worth over $100,000 in annual profit. Sources tell Turkington that losing the contract infuriated Mackerley. But did it drive him to commit murder? Florida detective Mike Driscoll decides it's time for a face-to-face with Mackerley.
Hi, Alan Mackerley?
Yeah.
Mike Driscoll.
On this first meeting, Driscoll plays his cards close to his chest.
I haven't heard or seen from Frank in months.
He tells Mackerley they're investigating Frank Black's disappearance, and they're also looking for a woman named Mia, who's in the busing industry.
A lady in the busing industry? There are no ladies in the busing industry. There's middle linebackers in the busing industry.
Okay, well, if you do hear from...
We didn't ask him any hard questions because we knew, but we obviously clearly knew from the phone records that he had had contact with him. And we didn't want to tip our hand to him that we knew that the phone calls had come from his house. So we at least had to give him the chance to say right up front, yes, Frank Black was here, or I met with Frank Black in Florida, and he left, and I don't know where he is. Had he said that, it may have changed the course of this investigation.
Appreciate it. You have yourself a good day.
"7 days after leaving New Jersey, there are no signs of Frank Black. Driscoll still has zero proof that Black's even dead. He orders police to scour all West Palm Beach car rental agencies, looking for any link. Investigators hit upon a major coincidence. At 6:16 p.m. on February 24th, Lisa Costello rented a car from the airport Hertz dealership. If Driscoll can show Black was in that car, he can tie Costello to the disappearance. The rental car is hauled in for a thorough forensic examination, but Driscoll is too late.
The vehicle had already been cleaned out 3 or 4 times, and we didn't find any forensic evidence, but it did show the unusual rental of a vehicle on the date of the disappearance of Frank Black.
The car is a dead end. Repeated cleanings have destroyed any fingerprints, fibers, or DNA that may have been there. A search for Black's body at all medical examiners' offices up and down the Florida coastline comes back negative. All signs of Frank Black peter out at the West Palm Beach airport. In his quest to nail down a link between his key suspects and the victim, Driscoll calls in an old friend from the FBI. Special Agent Jay Miller. One of Miller's tasks is to try and piece together Mackerley's timeline around the disappearance, see if there was anything interesting he did around the 24th. He strikes pay dirt when poring over Mackerley's credit card records.
I found that shortly after the disappearance of Frank Black, Alan had made a couple of purchases at a Walmart and a Kmart store in Stuart, Florida. I went to those stores and found that, in fact, Alan had purchased large quantities of cleaning supplies.
Cleaning supplies that hint at some sort of cover-up. After weeks of grueling legwork, Driscoll still has no hard evidence. A few credit card and telephone records aren't enough to make a case against the wealthy playboy.
Okay. Now listen, here's what I want you to do. You call him. Okay, use a fictitious name.
Every bone in his body tells him Frank Black has been murdered, and Alan Mackerley did it. All Driscoll has to do now is prove it. After dozens of interviews, numerous surveillance ops, and hundreds of man-hours spent on wiretaps, Agent Driscoll and his team still lack sufficient evidence to prove Alan and Lisa are behind Frank's demise. Bob Belanger is Assistant State's Attorney for Martin County.
The investigation seemed to be going nowhere. We had suspicions that Alan Mackerley was involved in the disappearance of Frank Black, but we didn't have enough evidence to make an arrest, and certainly didn't have enough evidence to prove that he committed murder beyond a reasonable doubt. And I remember in May 1996, as we were shutting down the wiretap, Dave Morgan and I had a conversation about what the next step was in the investigation. And we were both very dejected, and David Morgan said to me, "It looks like he got away with murder."
Criminal lawyer Paul Morris calls it a rush to judgment.
There's a theme running through this case, and it's an explanation for how the prosecutors went wrong. And that is, they put Alan Mackerley in their crosshairs. They targeted Alan Mackerley. They were convinced that he was responsible for Frank Black's disappearance.
In the hunt for more information, Driscoll turns to Mackerley's best friend, former Marine pilot Bill Anderson.
Hello.
Driscoll wagers that Anderson knows something, and that as a Marine, his sense of honor would compel him to tell the truth, especially if he was dealing with fellow Marines.
When Jay Miller and I first met Bill Anderson, we probably spent the first 45 minutes of that interview talking about the Marine Corps.
I was in the Marine Corps. Mike Driscoll was in the Marine Corps. The prosecutor on the case, Bob Belanger, was in the Marine Corps. And we sort of bonded. We developed a trust. And I think Bill knew that he could trust us, and we pledged our trust to him. We told Bill, look, we think you know more. We want to know what you know.
Bill Anderson knows exactly what happened to Frank Black.
Bill Anderson said that Mackerley had told him that he and Lisa had lured Frank Black down from New Jersey to West Palm Beach.
How he had taken Frank and had him in a headlock and taken a gun and placed it to his head and shot him.
And that occurred in the front hallway.
Go and get the tarp.
He further stated that, there was a lot of blood all over the place. And that he eventually wrapped the body in a tarp and brought it out to sea in his boat and dumped the body in the ocean.
And he figures he's going to kill him, and he's going to kill him in a place where he can easily dispose of his body. He's got the means. He's got a fast boat in an isolated residence right off the ocean. And so he's got all of this set up. Because he thought, as he had indicated to Bill Anderson, no body, no crime.
Apparently, when he got back to his house over the next day, he became concerned that the body may be floating or have resurfaced. And so he called Bill Anderson, who is a former Marine pilot and the pilot of Mackerley's plane, and asked Bill to go out and help him locate the body to see if it was floating.
And that was the initial confession by Alan Mackerley to Bill Anderson. It was over the telephone.
Driscoll finally knows where to search for signs of new evidence. Signs to prove that Frank Black's disappearance was a murder. Driscoll calls in the forensics unit to process Mackerley's home. It's been months since Black's disappearance. Detective Sergeant Grady Shirk is leader of Martin County's elite forensic unit.
Visually speaking, when we entered the house, it just looked like a normal house. There were no signs of blood or force or stress or anything. We photographed the residence, took videotaping of the residence, and then attempted to pick up the leads that we have and start piecing this together.
CSIs will do whatever it takes in the search for evidence. Detective Shirk knows that Mackerley has had months to clean up after the killing. Though Mackerley totally remodeled the front foyer, clues could still be hiding beneath the surface.
When a crime scene is cleaned extensively, the evidence just doesn't jump out at you, and you have to go in search of every little forensic hair and fiber and a little speck of blood.
All right, let's hope this is it. That's all we got.
Blood, however, doesn't always disappear. It can seep through floors and carpets deep into the subfloor. Any spatter cast off can find its way into unseen cracks and crevices. Shirk zeroes in on the terrazzo floor. If any blood made its way into the marble, chemicals like luminol will react with the iron in the blood, causing it to light up and glow.
And there was a small spot in that front hallway about the size of a dinner plate where in this terrazzo, in the cracks of the terrazzo, the aggregate between the rocks and the terrazzo, you had this almost spiderweb type luminol glow. And so we were quite excited about the prospect of getting DNA from that location in the home.
Finally, it seems Mackerley has slipped up. A chunk of flooring is removed and sent to the lab for more precise blood and DNA testing.
It was our expectation that the crime lab would then issue an analysis that would make the connection between Frank Black and the crime scene, because in this particular case, those two issues should have never come together.
But when the results come back from the lab, the case takes another turn. The house is a major disappointment. STR test results of stain 3 from the terrazzo floor indicate a positive match for human DNA. But the DNA is from a female. It's certainly not DNA from Frank Black.
After Mr. Mackerley had killed Frank Black, there was a considerable amount of blood in that front hallway, and he spent a considerable amount of time and effort cleaning up that front hallway, ripping out the carpeting, ripping out the drywall, buying cleaning supplies, and creating a veritable DNA wasteland.
When Lisa Costello is hauled in for questioning, she clams up and maintains her silence. She's thrown in jail in contempt of court in violation of an investigative subpoena. Is she protecting her rich boyfriend, or is she protecting herself? Tom Bacadol is assistant state attorney working the case with Bob Belanger.
Had we gone into the house the day after Frank Black arrived in West Palm Beach, we'd have had blood spatter on walls, we'd have had blood in carpet, we'd have had forensic evidence, and we'd have had a body probably if we had gotten there sooner. But we didn't, because the cops can't read minds and we can't predict the future. He was able to clean up and he was able to dispose of evidence.
Criminal lawyer Paul Morris doesn't buy it.
So you have to ask yourself, how could someone like Alan Mackerley know how to clean a crime scene to such a degree that there wouldn't be even any microscopic details of Frank Black's blood? How would anyone be able to do that? The point is, it can't be done. And the reason why there was no DNA of Frank Black at the scene is because it didn't occur that way. It's because Alan Mackerley wasn't there when Frank Black met his death.
But investigators are certain Mackerley is behind the disappearance and murder of Frank Black. The original blood-soaked drywall and carpeting from the house are long gone. This is the evidence Driscoll must somehow find to stop his case from imploding. With no hard evidence of Frank Black's blood inside Mackerley's home, Driscoll and Shirk turn their effort to the county dump. According to informant Bill Anderson, everything Mackerley used to clean up the kill zone was sent here. Somewhere beneath the mounds of earth and garbage lay the debris from the front hallway.
In that search, we were looking for anything and everything, from carpet to carpet strips to vacuum cleaners, drywall, 2x4s, anything that may turn up biological leads.
The dump covers over 400 acres. Sifting through it is an impossible task. But the CSIs have an inside scoop. At this dump, every truck coming in is charted and assigned a designated spot for offloading. Mackerley's dated dump receipts can be used to help pinpoint exactly where he dumped his garbage. Pat Graham is the landfill superintendent.
So that dumping area would be maybe 100 feet wide by 50 feet long, and a day's worth of waste maybe 10 or 12 feet deep. If you dump something today and you came back to me in 6 months and wanted to know approximately where, if you wanted to dig it up, we could find it. We could locate that area.
After days of digging, success. Carpeting with dark red stains, visually matching to Mackerley's.
It did create a lot of excitement. There was good days and bad days.
And it was a long shot, and when we did find what we thought were the vacuum cleaners in the carpeting, we were pretty happy about it.
I mean, for crying out loud, the man ripped out walls, carpeting, perfectly good vacuum cleaners, too, and threw them in the dump. Now, why do you do that?
Chemical testing at the lab should confirm the reddish stains are in fact Frank Black's blood. Serologist Vivian Armstrong inherits the task of processing the carpets.
And so I went through this carpeting, which was dirty, smelly, stained, just unbelievably filthy and smelly, and did KM testing on the top of all of the pieces of carpeting and on the bottom of all of the pieces of carpeting, and I found no evidence of blood.
After an entire day of testing, the carpets do not yield a single positive result. Once again, the forensics fail Agent Driscoll.
It's very interesting what happened with the search of the dump site. What happens when that carpeting is sent to the lab for DNA testing? No blood. And that sort of just quietly disappeared from the prosecution's arsenal, as did so many other things that didn't fit into their theory of the case. And the reason why all these square pegs don't fit in these round holes is because the prosecution has it wrong.
In the hunt for hard physical evidence, Shirk and Driscoll turn next to Mackerley's boats.
Bill Anderson, in his statement to us, he informed us that Alan Mackerley had taken Frank Black's dead body on his boat, went out the St. Lucie Inlet and approximately between 12 and 20 miles out into the Atlantic Ocean and dumped the body.
We were able to determine that our find of specific evidence items appeared to be significant. We had blood stains on carpet, we had blood stains on fabric and walls. So our finding of the evidence was quite pleasing. And as a result, we were hoping the crime lab would come back with a lab report that would show the connection between Frank Black and this boat.
But once again, lab tests on the samples come back inconclusive. Cleaning chemicals found mixed in with the reddish liquid have contaminated the evidence so much, lab techs can't even tell if the blood is human.
But one interesting thing that the individual from Florida Department of Law Enforcement found was that when she examined the spot on the carpet, it appeared to have been clean. Now, it doesn't take a genius to figure out if the guy is willing to rip out drywall, tear up carpeting, throw away vacuum cleaners, paint, and do everything that he did, he wouldn't take an extra few minutes to scrub down the carpet in the boat that he transported the body in. So I think that was a pretty important little piece of evidence from a forensic perspective that we're able to rely upon.
Investigators uncover more clues in the boat's electronic navigational gear. A GPS waypoint confirms the boat was out 16 miles south-southeast of the St. Lucie buoy. This is exactly where informant Bill Anderson told investigators Mackerley said he dumped the body. Forensic divers head out to open water in search of Black's body. There's little hope of recovering it. The area, nicknamed the Desert of the Ocean, is shark-infested and 900 feet deep. Chances are Black's body never even made it close to the sea floor. With no body and no smoking gun, Driscoll does not give up. His team hatches a sting operation in hopes of getting a confession. Mackerley may appear to have the upper hand, but Driscoll wagers he can still be caught. Mackerley confessed to Anderson once. Maybe his best friend can get him to confess again. August 29th, 1996. Agents from the FBI, FDLE, and Martin County Sheriff's Office wire Bill Anderson and his home in hopes of catching Mackerley's confession on tape. It's a risky operation. If Mackerley suspects Anderson of crossing him, there's no telling how he may react.
The plan was to have Mr. Mackerley come over to Bill Anderson's house, sit down at the kitchen table across from Mr. Anderson, looking directly into that camera that was hidden in the radio, and have a conversation about the murder.
Right there, you know. Okay, don't be too obvious about everything that you're doing. Okay, make sure that
We had Alan Mackerley under surveillance with surveillance teams on the ground and an aircraft. We knew his whereabouts. We knew what he was doing.
no way to do this without me.
He already was suspected of murdering one man in cold blood. Who's to say that when he's looking at an imminent arrest or a friend who's now providing evidence on him, that how he could react?
We had one individual, Mike Driscoll, secreted in a closet near the area where the recording was occurring, just in the event we had any problems.
At approximately 11 a.m., the aerial surveillance team trails Mackerley to Anderson's house. The trap is set and ready to catch a killer.
I prepared a list of topics for Anderson to discuss with Mackerley. And these topics, again, were ones that I thought would obtain statements without scaring Mackerley off. And that's what we did. And Bill would throw out different ideas to Mackerley, and Mackerley would respond.
Stay like it. Stay. How you doing? All right. Good to see you.
You're a big guy. Good to see you.
Coffee? Okay. Your friend Mike Driscoll was here this morning.
He gave it to you this morning?
Yep.
Just like today?
Yes. They came in, he and the FBI guy.
Uh-huh. Miller?
Uh-huh. Look, I got, what, 3 choices. I leave, listen to me. I got 3 choices. I leave the country, okay? or I go to jail with Lisa. And Driscoll threatened that when he walked out the door today, okay? He says, you pull what Lisa did, you'll follow her right into the Martin County Jail. And the other thing I'm gonna do is lie, okay?
And when he was there with Bill Anderson, he was extremely paranoid. In fact, at one point, he leaned over to Bill and said, shh, they're outside, they're there now. And in fact, we were there.
Alan, have you told anybody that you told me?
Never.
Never. You sure? Because that, look, you understand that if somebody comes out of the woodwork, nobody can hear us, there's nobody here. Well, close it then. Never what? I can't hear you. What do you want me to do?
During that covert taping, I mean, he was very, very nervous when the subject of Frank Black was brought up, whispering, uttering. He wouldn't even discuss it inside the residence. They actually walked outside. Fortunately, we had a recording device secreted on Bill Anderson's body.
Well, I sure hope you covered up. Did the credit cards go down? No, Frank. All right, I'll go lie. I'll do it. But I want you to know I'm scared shitless.
We were hoping for a home run, and ultimately, after we reviewed the tape and the transcript, we said it wasn't a home run, but it was a stand-up triple. We're pretty happy with what we got. And quite frankly, anytime Tom and I would get dejected or despair about the case, we would pop in that videotape, watch it, and then say, this is a great case.
Alan Mackerley's days as a wealthy playboy are about to come to an end. August 29th, 1996, 5:08 p.m. After 6 months of exhausting and sometimes trying investigation, Agent Driscoll finally has his moment.
And Alan had come out of his house walking his dog, and at that point he was approached by law enforcement, arrested, handcuffed, and taken to jail. Period.
11825, code 6,
Okay, let's go, guys.
And I honestly believe in my own mind that it took the best of the best to bring this man to justice. It was a fight. It was a battle. We worked for every inch we gained in this case. We worked for it. It was endless hours, a life of its own.
The hunt for Frank Black's killer is over. But with no smoking gun, no body, and no eyewitnesses, can the prosecution's case stand up in a court of law?
This is a case where there's no body. This is a case where there's no murder weapon. This is a case where there's no DNA that would connect Alan Mackerley to the murder. This is a case where we submit there is no motive, certainly no believable motive, no reason in the world why someone like Alan Mackerley in his position would murder Frank Black. The case is at best a wholly circumstantial evidence case, and the case is riddled with reasonable doubt.
Heading into trial, Mackerley's high-powered lawyers introduce a counter-theory. The prosecution has it all wrong. Alan didn't kill Frank Black. Lisa Costello did. After months of investigation, Alan Mackerley goes on trial for the murder of Frank Black.
Let me tell you, the truth is immutable. But what the truth is, ladies and gentlemen, is that this man, Alan Mackerley, is a murderer.
The busing tycoon admits he and his girlfriend conspired to draw Black into a bogus business deal. But Mackerley claims he never wanted Black to come to Florida. Mackerley says all he was trying to do with the phone calls was find out more about Black's company so he could try and buy him out.
Alan Mackerley was not there when the event happened. All he was able to relate to the jury was what Lisa Costello told him. Lisa Costello said she was alone with Frank Black in Alan Mackerley's house, and that Frank Black, when he discovered it was Alan Mackerley's house, attacked Lisa Costello, and she defended herself by striking him over the head with a dumbbell from the weight room, and she killed him.
Mackerley says he cleaned up his house and covered up for Lisa because he loved her. He did it to protect her, but he had nothing to do with the dumping of Frank Black's body. Prosecutor Bob Belanger doesn't buy it.
Do we know exactly what happened minute to minute? No, we never know exactly what happened in a murder case. We don't have to prove a case beyond all doubt. We don't have to answer every question. We just have to prove the elements of the crime beyond a reasonable doubt. But certainly, Lisa Costello didn't know Frank Black, didn't dislike him, would have no motive to kill him. Alan Mackerley was the driving force behind this.
When Costello learns her boyfriend is blaming her for Frank's murder, she breaks her silence. After sitting in jail for months, she's now ready to talk. Costello cops to bringing Black to Mackerley's house, but that's it. She had no idea Alan was going to shoot him. She pleads no contest to false imprisonment and manslaughter charges and receives 10 years in exchange for her testimony.
Alan and Lisa devised a scheme to entice Frank Black to fly from New Jersey to Florida. Now, once he got to Florida and the exact nature of how the murder came down, there are only two people that know how Frank Black died that night in Alan's house, Lisa Costello and Alan Mackerley. I believe that Alan enticed Frank Black to Florida with the intention of murdering him just as he did. And I'll believe that forever.
To lie and to cover up, correct?
Correct. At this first trial, Mackerley is found guilty for the murder and kidnapping of Frank Black and sentenced to life in prison. But his lawyers win an appeal on grounds contesting the kidnapping charge. The case goes to a second trial, which results in a hung jury.
And so I'm going to declare a mistrial in this case. And
a lone dissenter can't imagine Mackerley is the kind of man who would kill. But Belanger refuses to give up. He takes the case to the Supreme Court of Florida, and in early March 2003, a third jury finds Alan Mackerley guilty for the first-degree murder of Frank Black.
12 jurors who heard the case the first time found him guilty. 11 out of 12 jurors the second time found him guilty, and 12 out of 12 the third time found him guilty. So the idea that we didn't have a body, we don't have DNA, we don't have a murder weapon, that all initially causes concern, but you really have to look at the totality of the case and how all the evidence fits together, and it really is a compelling case when all is said and done.
I've been in law enforcement 25 years now. Of my 25, this case has gone on for almost a third of it. So in terms of its length and duration, nothing else comes close.
This is a very sad case. The family lost a father and now a grandfather. So we all grieve for the family in this case. But from a law enforcement standpoint, we have to look at this as a success.
Mackerley's lawyer, Paul Morris, sees the case quite differently. He's launching an appeal for a fourth trial.
Alan Mackerley will never give up hope that the truth will come out. He'll never give up hope that Lisa Costello will come forward and exonerate him, and will never give up hope that ongoing investigations will help to confirm that his testimony has always been the truth.
This case is not about who Alan Mackerley is, because we all know now that Alan Mackerley is a murderer. This case was about who was Frank Black and what brought him to this, crossroads of his life.
Lisa Costello is due to be released from prison shortly. Her former boyfriend is currently serving a life sentence and is ineligible for parole. While the New Jersey busing tycoon sits in jail, his company continues to earn millions, busing children to school.